Right, so here we are on the right angle cross of Contagion. We keep going with the 3-5 prof. The 3-5. In particularly like the third line, because I think again, I'm always searching for nice things to say about the third line because it can be an essential balance to their pessimistic reputation. That the third line here in the 14 is service. And it's one of the most beautiful lines here, bar none, in the sense that, yeah, you have the utilization of talent and wealth for the highest good. And even in its detriment, it's okay. Even though it's hard to see a hard line to see that way. It's also okay. One of the things to understand about the transition, for example, that's taking place in the world in the last 50 years at one level, globalization is a horror. You go into that little village in the third world and they have a television and they say Baywatch. It's like, oh my God, I want that too. And one side they say, oh, isn't that cool? They're poor and they're hungry and they're this and that. But then again, the very fact is that it's been going on in the world for the last 50 years. In most of the places, they were dirt poor when they first saw it. Now I have seen TVs and all the things that can go with it. And I don't know if they all have that silicone girls that stand on the beach, but they have all the other equipment that goes with it. One of the most astonishing things to recognize is that most of the first world economy nations of Asia had a lower per capita earning than the major cities of Black Africa at the end of the First World War. A Nigerian was earning more money than a Korean at the end of the First World War, more than somebody from Taiwan. When you see the statistics, it's astonishing. So one of the things to understand about the other side of service, which is greed. One side is the selfless, and the other side is greed-driven, and both of them do a great service in the binary in which we have to deal with power, money, and its movement into the future. But think about how difficult it is for the 3-5 on this cross. Greed is not something that is welcomed in society. It isn't. Supposedly, one of the great moral sins is greed. The other thing is that to utilize talent and wealth, you have to have it. And there's nothing more depressing in a sense than this third line. It speaks the whole story of the third line process of trial and error. Unless you fail, you do not learn. Unless you experience the plane itself, you do not gain any advantage. So it's very, very nice that you can be of service this way or that. But first, you have to accumulate these things. You cannot be of service in terms of wealth unless you have wealth to be of service with. It's just something that is logical. And talent is nice, but talent that isn't developed, talent that isn't nurtured, isn't talent that can be of service to anything. And one of the things to see about service that all of service must begin with a certain level of greed. You have to be able to be driven to the talent and its fulfillment or the health and its potential in order to be able to have that turnout in your life so that you use it for the advantage of humanity. It's always so interesting to watch and to see it every day. It was something that was very common in 100 years ago. We saw it again in the computer bubble of the 90s. All of a sudden, you had people who made absolutely astronomical amounts of money. And the very first thing they do once they get to the astronomical money is that they set up charitable foundation, philanthropies, and they start putting out, regardless of what the percentage are, for all the dislike of Bill Gates, which I never understood, and Microsoft, which I still don't understand. He's somebody who's already giving away several billions of dollars to very good things. The fact is that he couldn't have done that before they accumulated the wealth of power. And the fact that he had talent to know how to build a business didn't mean he was ready to be of service to humanity until the business was built. And by the way, that's been a great service to humanity. But I want you to grasp something about the 14th gate. It's a baby. It comes into the world. It's really innocent. It needs to be nurtured and it needs time. And because it's essentially sacred, and particularly in those cases when it's going to be part of a generator's design, how important it is that these children know that response means. At the third line being, particularly at the third five, that suffers so much from these misconceptions, what they can be, that unless these children are raised in a healthy way, they never get that chance. Remember something about the 14th gate. Whenever the 14th gate fails to result as greed for money or materialism, and because this is the cross of contagion, the material hunger on this planet, the sense of material disenfranchisement, those beings that didn't think they had enough, those beings who think they should have more, and all of them are byproduct of this contagion, the filled experience of the 14 and the contagion that goes out into the world around it. The other thing is that the third line business, any of these mutated beings on the planet who carry the thick line in their profile, when they go through the third line stage, half of this planet is under 30. Half of this planet right now is looking for a career. And most of these beings who are under 30 on this planet today have no work in front of them, no career in front of them, no future in front of them. I watched last night a program that's very popular in Iraq right now. And it's a reality show of prisoners who have been caught. People have been doing the bombings and whatever, and they're totally ignorant. They have no education. There's the lowest level of the society. There's a guy who admitted that he blew up a place and he did it for $200 American. It had nothing to do with ideology, had nothing to do with being a jihadist. It had nothing to do with anything. He was getting paid. One of the things to see is when you're looking at so many of these revolutionary environments where you're looking at society like Palestine or whatever, you have to understand that the young people have no future. They look ahead and they see nothing. They see no potential for career. They have no deep, deep pessimism. And you so end up with this enormous greed and hunger for money and power. And so you end up with this enormous need and power. And it seems to be the way you get it to it. So if you kill the leader, if you rob the leader, you can take the leader's money. Instead of it, if you're developed properly, you're the power. You become the leader. You can honestly earn all of that, and then you'll be able to give it back. But the thing I want to leave you with is the third line theme to be understood that all third line beings are here to be of service, and they're here to be of service in the largest sense of the word, and that they're here, the ones that are designed to see that works in our life. And that's an ultimate service. As I told every third line being, and it's based on this line in this hexagrams that you learn from your experiences. The potential is always wealth and power. Always. This is the power. This is the path of discovery. So let's go to the 3-6. If you're 3-6 on this cross of the right angle cross of contagion and you're born in Algeria, the chances of you becoming a crazy jihadist are about 99.9%. 60% of their society is under 25. They have a theoretical unemployment that's probably around 40%. When you look at an environment like that, if you're 3-6 and you're born into that environment, that 3-3 phase for the first 28 days is going to give you such a deep pessimism about your ability to be able to accumulate power and wealth, and you get to see that the other side of it. It's frightening how powerful the sacral is in dysfunction. And we're talking about the sacral theme of frustration at perhaps its most violent. The frustration that arises that there's no opportunity to accumulate or retain power. There's no opportunity to be able to establish a valuable, viable material environment. And so for many 3-6, the very pessimism of the early part of their life, these are the kind of people that resign themselves onto the lowest level of the rung. This kind of people that will end up doing the most manual work. And they look at your design and you see that the 14-3 and you think, Jesus, what are they doing here? But if you go back to what happened to them, to what they experienced, the way they were conditioned by their family, by the society, you see right away it's a choicelessness descended into hell. It was choiceless with nothing they can do. Then we go to the 4-6. When we're on the 4-6 on the right angle cross of contagion, the fourth line is the line of security. And here you begin to see the sensibility system of the 40. Remember how difficult it is for individuality to create the bonds that will allow for this kind of material development, and particularly when you're dealing with the lower trigram, which is an essential introverted process. So here we get to the fourth line and we get to the security. And what we're dealing with is that the fourth line understand that its ability to accumulate and retain wealth is going to be rooted in its network. That's the investment in its network, and from the network comes power. All fours understand the power of having a network. They all do, because it's a form of power. Here you can see its root, what it's all about. This is about the security, and it's the concentration on establishing a strong foundation. It's interesting that this is the harmonic theme, protection from assault. Now, it's all about competition. In other words, when you're dealing with the fourth line here, what you're dealing with is you have to be able to protect yourself from the competition. You've got to get to this very secure what you're doing. You've got to get to retain your power and your wealth in order to fend off those that want to take away what's yours. Darwinism. This is Darwinism. This is the survival of the fittest. This is the real Darwinism. And then you have to see that the four really understand that they've got to hold on to their line, because if they don't hold on to their line, they can be wiped out so easily. And again, to see these two sides of materialism that's in the 14, and to realize that the dilemma, you can always see the dilemma when materialism is the theme, because it's not the theme. Power is the theme. So what you see in the four is that you can't afford to lose your power, because if you lose your power, all is lost. In other words, you will be the victim. It's the 4-6, so you're going to have to go through the dilemma on the 4-3 phase. And everything about the 4-3 phase is that the networking is never right. Whenever you're dealing with somebody who has the fourth line in their profile, their relationships in the first 28 years, most of the relationships, the networks that they develop, the networks that they still maintain, it's very hard for fours to give up their networks. That most of these connections were simply incorrect. And not only it's not a matter of you're investing in a network that brings you, or you're investing in an aspect of the network that doesn't bring you in return, but worse, they will offer you returns that are often no value. They will offer you returns that will eat away your power, and that will eat away at your wealth. And the thing about the 14 is that its wealth is its byproduct, is its capacity to empower. The more it empowers, the more likely it is that the wealth will come its way, but it has to be able to empower. It has to empower the right thing at the right time. Again, it's all about the right thing at the right time. It's not the right time. It's not happening.